Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here with my September wrap up where I will be talking about all the books that I read in September of 2024. Looking at my story graph, I will put the stats right here as usual. I read a total of 8 books, which equaled out to be 2,912 pages. So not as many books as I normally read. It was a rough month. It looks like it took an average of 9 days for me to finish a book. Looking at moods, no surprise, dark, tense, mysterious. That's typically what my moods usually end up being. I ended up reading all fiction books. I didn't read any nonfiction books this month. Looking at my genres, thriller and horror are the top 2. Normally that's flipped, but I only read 8 books this month. So a lot of them were thriller books and not as many in the horror genre. That's okay. Still spooky books. Looking at the format, I read 2 physical books, 1 audiobook, and 5 digital or ebooks. Again, I don't know what happened this month. I don't know. No comment. I don't know. Star ratings, I have an average of 4.07 stars. This was a very, very mediocre month for me. I had 1 book with no rating because I did not finish that book. We'll talk about that book in a minute. I had 3 3.5 star books, 1 4-star book, 2 4.5 star books, and 1 5-star book. Before I get started talking about the books that I read, I do want to talk about the books that were on my September TBR that I did not end up getting to. So the first book, once again, From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. I did not get a chance to get to this book. Eventually, I'm going to read this book, but I did not get a chance. I didn't get to it this month. Again, September was a weird month. So I have the slip of paper here. I'm going to put it back in the TBR jar to be pulled at another time. I also did not get to Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. That is a young fiction book, and I just was not in the mood or the headspace to read a young adult book. And so this one, also going back in, and Magic Hour, I put it on hold. I just picked up my copy today, and today is October 5th. So I'm going to read it, but I didn't get a chance to read it in September. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the jar in case I don't actually get to reading it this month either. I also pulled Plain Bad Heroines. I am listening to the audiobook for this. It is 20 hours long. I am a little over 50% the way through, so I'm not putting this back in the jar because I am reading this book. I just didn't finish it before the end of September. Holy cannoli. Apparently I was not ready to film this video. I am all over the place. Sorry if it's very weird. Moving on to the books that I read in September, the first book was one that did not get a rating. I DNF'd it, which means did not finish it. That book is Hot Singles in Your Area by Jordan Shively. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I received an ARC or Advanced Reader copy from NetGalley of this book, so I started reading it. And I do not give up on books easily. I usually will push through. I got to 40% of this book, and I couldn't anymore. It was strange, and I feel like it was strange just to be strange. I had no idea what was happening. You're following 2 different people, but they're using a bunch of terms like you're supposed to know what they are, but they weren't. And then it had pages and pages and pages that looked like this, where it's just random stuff. And I'm sure if you read that stuff, it forms a story within the story because it's newspaper clippings and articles. But probably because of the ebook format, I couldn't piece any of it together. I don't know. I started again, I got 40% of the way through, and I was like, I cannot even force myself to finish this book. So unfortunately, I did stop reading that, so I don't have a rating for Hot Singles in Your Area. My first 3.5 star book was Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. I read this because I have a group of friends, the Candy Salad Book Club. This was our choice for September/October Actually, it was August/September. We were supposed to meet in September to talk about this book. We actually didn't even meet until today. So anyway, in this book, you are following 3 estranged siblings. Their mother has just passed away, so they all come back to her house and are going through her things. They are going through a box of old home movies, and on one of the tapes, they see things that indicate that their parents had something to do with a child who had gone missing back like 20 years ago. I don't know, 15 years ago? I think it was 15. Anyway, it looked like her parents had like offed her, abducted this child and killed her. And so they didn't know what to do with this information because, again, it's a cold case. Their father disappeared, ran away 7 years ago, so they can't ask their father anything about what's on the tape. They can't ask their mother because she just passed away, and they do not have a healthy sibling relationship. So they're, going through trying to figure out what happened to this girl and what involvement their parents had in her abduction. This book, I read it quickly, but mostly because I didn't have anything else to read. The writing, very simplistic. It just the sentence structure. Like, it was just very simple writing. I wasn't totally engaged in the story. It was a little bit of a twist for me. Parts of it I had not figured out. And again, I don't go into books and I don't read books trying to figure out like what the twist is or who the killer is or anything like that. I don't know. It was just a meh book. I read it for book club, and I probably will never read it again. The next 3.5-star book I read was The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. This is a book that I had picked out of my TBR jar in August and actually finished it September 1st. So technically couldn't count it for August because I didn't finish. I mean, I could have, but that would have bothered my brain. So I'm putting it in September. So I do have a slip of paper for it, because this is one that I had picked out of my TBR jar. So here we go. Yay, I actually did something. I accomplished one thing that I was supposed to accomplish this month. Except it was for August, so was it really accomplishing anything? I'm telling you, September was rough. Anyway, The Perfect Child. This is a creepy kid story. You are following a married couple who both work at a hospital. One day, a very young girl, is brought in. It's clear that she's been abused, and her mother has passed away, so she's going into the foster care system. And so the couple, who cannot have children of their own, decide to foster her and then end up adopting her. Well, things don't go great because the daughter, Jenny, I think her name is Jenny. Janie, Jane, the daughter, I think it's Janie or Jane, really, really, really latches on to the father. I believe his name was Chris. Clearly this book left a really lasting impression in my brain, huh? She really latches on to the father. She doesn't want anything to do with the mother. So basically, like, it's like every other creepy kid book that's out there, where there's a creepy kid, or like a kid who hates the mom but loves the dad, but no one believes the mom when she talks about all this crazy, mean, stuff that the child is doing. That's what it is. It ended on a cliffhanger, like most of these books do. Apparently there is a companion, like, sequel novella that talks about the child, Jane/Janie, in the future. I didn't read that. Again, it was just, it wasn't that enjoyable for me. I feel like other books have done this trope better, and I didn't really care about the characters. I don't know. It was just, again, overall, just a meh book for me. My last 3.5-star book was Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. In this book, you are following Lori and her sister Abby, I think. Lori has started this pen pal relationship with a serial killer who is in prison, And he asks her to go to his old, like, riverside cottage to get something. And while she is there, he wants her to continue down the river and go see the Riverman. So Laurie takes her sister Abby with her because Abby, although she is the older sister, has a mental disability. And so Laurie has been tasked with taking care of her. And so you're following Laurie and Abby throughout the story. You find out more about their past, and you find out about if they meet the Riverman. I read this book for the August Buzzword Readathon hosted by Books and Lala. The theme for August was senses, words of senses. So see, gone to see the Riverman is the reason I chose it. This book definitely leans towards extreme horror. There was definitely some taboo subjects and some pretty graphic scenes. It's not the most extreme horror I've ever read, but it's not your typical horror book. Again, it was just kind of mediocre for me. I don't know. I can't tell you why. As I've said before, I rate books based on vibes, and this one just was a 3.5 star vibe. My one and only 4-star book was The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor. I had checked this book out from the library. My brother read it earlier this year and really, really liked this book. And I had heard some other people on BookTube talking about it, and they enjoyed it too. So when I saw it at the library, I picked it up. You are following a scientist, and she's like a marine biologist, knows all about the oceans and especially octopi. They discover this species of octopi who have become so intelligent, they are starting to communicate with humans. The humans figure out the language that this species is using and are able to communicate with them. This is also set in, I'm assuming, a future where there's like androids and there's like robots and androids drive a lot of the sailing ships, are in the science labs. It has a lot to do with like AI, basically, like robots, and are they really truly human? Like, do they have their own thoughts and feelings? How do we interact with that? But then it also has to do with the octopi, like what makes a human, because they can communicate. The octopi can communicate. They are starting to use tools like early humans, things like that. I listened to this as an audiobook and I enjoyed it. It did take me a while to get through, and clearly all of it didn't get in my brain because I can't remember all of it, and it's a really bad explanation, but the writing was beautiful. I liked the story. You're following a couple different POVs, and so part of that, I think the problem is that I had listened to it and not read it. I think it would have been slightly less confusing for my brain if I had actually read the book instead of an audiobook. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. It is, again, it is not the typical genre that I read. It's not a horror book. It's kind of just like contemporary fiction, but it was a nice palate cleanser between all the, the mediocre thrillers and horror books that I'd been reading this month. My first 4.5 star book this month was Magnolia Parks Into the Dark. This is the latest Magnolia Parks book that has been published. It is part of a series. It's the 5th one in the series, so it is hard for me to talk about without, spoilering or like talking about the other books in the series. So if you've never read these books, it's not going to make any sense to you. But I continue to love these books. I continue to love Magnolia, and I love BJ. I love their relationship. The end of the last Magnolia Parks book was jaw-dropping to me, and this one picked up fairly close. It kind of jumped timelines a little bit, but it picks up fairly close to the end of the last book. And just seeing how Magnolia is dealing with that ending, how she and BJ are trying to grow together as a couple, and just like grow as people, because they're 25 and 27, I think, and they just need to like grow up and be adults. And it's just, I don't know, I love it. I don't love it as much as the 3rd book, which was Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home. That's my favorite in the series. But overall, still really enjoyed these books. Kind of sad that it's over for now. I really hope, but I don't necessarily hope that Jessa Hastings writes more Magnolia Parks books. I feel like their story is done. But I am going to miss those characters because I did love them so much. My last 4.5-star book was The Deep by Nick Cutter. This was not on my TBR list. This was I have had this book on my shelf for 2 years. I don't know what to read. I'm mood reading and I'm picking up The Deep. So I did. In this book, the world has been ravaged by an epidemic, a virus disease called the Gets, in that once you contract this disease, you slowly start forgetting everything. So first you start forgetting like anniversaries or dates or where you put your keys. And then you start forgetting like long-term stuff. But then your body starts forgetting that it has to breathe, or your heart forgets it has to beat. So eventually you pass away that way because you literally forget everything. Right now, there's no cure for this disease, but there is a strange substance called ambrosia that is found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. So Luke Nelson is tasked with going down to a laboratory that is run by his brother Caleb that is 8 miles under the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Luke is tasked with going down there to talk to his brother and find out the research and get the research and bring it back to the surface to hopefully cure this horrible disease. So a lot of this book takes place in a lab under the ocean, very dark, very cold, very creepy, because of course, it's a horror book, so things are not all happy rainbow sunshines down under the ocean. It was freaky for me because, again, claustrophobic, don't like the dark, would not like to be 8 miles under the ocean. They just made a really big deal about like the water pressure in that. One thing wrong and it would all collapse on you and you'd be gone before you even knew anything happened. So I guess that would be good. But very creepy, very creature featurey because you're learning about this ambrosia and what it does to like living things. I really liked this book, and I love Nick Cutter's writing. He also wrote The Troop, which I really enjoyed. I read that a few years ago. And although this was kind of a strange book to read in September because it gives more like summer vibes because of the ocean setting, it was just, cold, dark, scary Pacific Ocean is perfect for the beginning of fall, and I highly enjoyed this one. I think I liked The Troop better, but this was just another great book by Nick Cutter. And my one and only 5-star book is a ridiculous book. It is Sideways Stories from Wayside School by Louis Sachar. I think that's how you say his last name. I don't know. I meant to look it up and I forgot to. I don't know how to say his last name. He's written a lot of books. He wrote Holes. Apparently there's like 5 or 6 books in this Wayside series. This is a book that I read many, many, many years ago when I was in elementary school. And I just remember thinking, this book is so strange. Well, I was on Facebook one day last week and I saw a post about this book and went down a rabbit hole. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love these books so much because they're so weird. I remember loving these books. I read them several times when I was younger. And so I went on Hoopla and they had a copy of it to read. Hoopla is one of the apps that my library uses and they had it available to read. So I decided to download it. It was very fast. I read it in a day because it was like less than 200 pages. But it was just as fun and strange and silly as I remembered it. So it got a 5-star because it just hit all those nostalgia points and I just had so much fun reading it just like I did when I was a kid. So those are all the books that I read in September of 2024. Again, kind of a mediocre month. I was not happy with a lot of the books that I read this month. But that's okay because I did have a couple really good ones. So now I want to know, have you read any of these books? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.